Chick-fil-A's decision to refocus its charitable giving has a lot of people upset. What troubles me is not so much where the money's now going, it's the message this decision sends. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. Although the announcement didn't mention which groups would no longer be funded, most media outlets covering the Chick-fil-A Foundation's press release on Monday did. Chick-fil-A to stop donating to some groups following LGBTQ protest, read the USA Today headline. Chick-fil-A will no longer fund anti-LGBTQ organizations, said ABC News. Chick-fil-A to stop funding groups that oppose gay rights, read the United Press International headline. Those are very different headlines than the one that the Chick-fil-A Foundation gave to its own announcement. Chick-fil-A Foundation announces 2020 priorities to address education, homelessness, hunger. Of course, it's obvious why the headlines were so dramatically different. After all, one of the groups that will no longer be funded by Chick-fil-A is the Salvation Army. You know, they specialize in ministering to the homeless and the hungry. Clearly, there was more to the announcement than new priorities. What's not clear, however, is why the fast food chain made this decision now, after fully weathering the storm they faced over 7 years ago when then CEO Dan Cathy stated his views on traditional marriage. Today, 7 years later, having not made any public statements on sex or marriage since, the only real guilt that critics can point to is who they give their money to. Still, their reputation among some is as a hateful, bigoted organization. In fact, a friend who teaches in a comparatively conservative business school on the West Coast just told me that a student called Chick-fil-A anti-woman. I have no idea where that one comes from. In fact, Chick-fil-A stopped giving to so-called culture war organizations a long time ago. Monday's breathless headlines were referring to groups like the Salvation Army or the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, who are called anti-gay not so much because they advocate for historic and Orthodox Christian views on sex and marriage, but because they merely hold them. And at least when it comes to the Salvation Army, it depends on what you mean by hold them. Of course, as a private company, Chick-fil-A can support any organizations it wants. Not every person, much less every company, much less a chicken restaurant, has to join a side in these culture wars. Although the left has been incredibly effective at weaponizing companies, from Gillette to Sprite, in order to advance ideological goals, I don't begrudge any company, even if founded and owned by Christians, who try to sit out some of these unwinnable battles, especially while they still can. Soon, I predict, not actively fighting for progressive causes will earn you all the labels and adjectives Chick-fil-A is trying to now shed. Still, I find Chick-fil-A's decision sad on at least two levels. First, their growth to being the third largest fast food chain on the planet has clearly shown that you don't have to cave to the pressure in order to survive and grow as a company. In fact, I'll bet you a number 4 meal with 4 chicken strips right now that this decision will be the one that hurts their bottom line. Millions of Americans rallied around the restaurant in 2012 when LGBT advocates called for a boycott, and again in more recent years when cities like San Antonio banned the restaurant from their airports. This decision will not only lose them the support that they've had, it will embolden the bullies and will make it hard for other companies not to likewise cave to the pressure. Even more sad, however, is that without ever mentioning their names, the Chick-fil-A Foundation's decision will only reinforce the slander that these organizations they're no longer giving to are in fact anti-LGBT. It will only reinforce that all the good that these organizations do is immediately made invalid if they are Christian groups with historic and biblical Christian convictions. By refusing to offer any clarity whatsoever on the reasoning behind their decision, Chick-fil-A allowed the headline to be rewritten in a way that furthers the goal of the LGBT bullies. That ultimately there's only one acceptable position on these controversial issues: full support and full affirmation. I find it ironic that also on Monday, pop superstar Ellie Goulding announced that she would not pull out of a halftime performance during a Thanksgiving Day football game that will officially launch the Salvation Army's Red Kettle Holiday campaign. Like Chick-fil-A, she had faced pressure to disassociate from the Salvation Army. Unlike Chick-fil-A, she decided not to. Now, on another note, we're nearing the end of the year, and if you value the daily dose of sanity that you get from Breakpoint each and every day, please Would you make your year-end gift at breakpoint.org/podcast? We'll put the link in the show resources. Again, it's breakpoint.org/podcast. Your gift will help us raise the $475,000 we need to start next year strong and to give even more Christians the clarity, the confidence, and the courage they need to serve God in this cultural moment. Again, you can make your gift at breakpoint.org/podcast. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stonestreet.